Alright, time to play some video games. Man, I sure do wish nothing bad happens to Timmy. Wait, what?
No, 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 no! Wait, 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 wait! Wait, 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 wait!
So I joined the GMTK Game Jam 2026 where I have to make a game in 4 days. The theme this time is Countdown. Most people will probably think of something that is related to the timer. So I would definitely want to be super original and not copy other people. Just kidding, I ended up just going for a timer based game. But there's a twist. I was very inspired by this VR game called On Loop, where every time you die, a copy of you appears and helps you solve the puzzle. The game does get pretty chaotic, and you can even talk to your own selves or perhaps sing some songs with yourselves. So I kinda wanna make something similar to it, but in 2D. This is because I've joined a couple of game jams before this, and for the past 3 games, all of them have been 3D games, so I wanted to make something different. So I started with simple shapes by using this simple square. Then, every 10 seconds the square dies, but the red square, which is the past version of the square, will still do the same actions. Now, even just from these squares, I can kinda tell how chaotic this can be. Then, I made this object where the player can grab it and can throw it as well. I use a simple triangle for it for now, and it works pretty well. I've also made a pressure plate which uses the circle sprite, but it doesn't really do anything yet other than changing some numbers. There's also a reset button now to reset everything, so the player can restart the game quite easily. Now that I got most of the core mechanics set up, I decided to work on the visuals. I made a grid with these random squares and made a simple custom shader to make it kind of pulse, which is the blue background you've been seeing in the video. Then, I made the tiles for the floor and walls and also made Timmy. I also made a couple of animations for him so he can start walking in any direction. Then, I drew a key for the throwable object and a pressure plate sprite with 2 sizes as well. I've also made a simple timer and I made it so that the timer syncs up with the background, turning the background red as it goes on, which I thought was pretty cool. Then, I went on to make multiple more things that I can use, like the spike that kills Timmy instantly, a turret that shoots at Timmy, a box that Timmy can push, a moving platform that can go over spikes, and a giant candy as an objective for little Timmy. I also made this transporter to tell the player where Timmy starts. Other than that, I made a scrolling shader to make Timmy's past selves look like those time trial ghost thingies. I've also made a keyhole and there was a door at some point, but I didn't end up using it because I didn't have time to design the levels for it. Now at this point, I already spent around 2.5 days working on the game, and I have made a playground area where I have all the mechanics in the game, but I need proper levels. Originally, I wanted to add a gun that the player can use to shoot the other clones, but I realized I didn't have much time left and I don't want to leave the levels to the last minute. I almost forgot. I also added these number UIs to make it clear to the player how much things are needed or left for each of these objects. My level design process was very interesting, and I really wish I saved my sketches because all I did was sketch the objects in Microsoft Paint and then just slap it into the game. I didn't sketch it randomly though. I got advice from a friend of mine who's a seasoned game designer saying that I should make levels with a specific framework in mind. The way the levels are designed are basically start with mechanic A and make it easy, do mechanic A more but medium, and then hard. Then if I want to introduce another mechanic, I do the same thing, mechanic B easy mode, medium mode, and then hard mode. Then, afterwards, I combine both mechanics by making it easy, medium, hard with both of it at the same time. This works really well for my game, and throughout the 20 levels that I ended up making, I would say that I was pretty happy with it. But I didn't do much playtesting, so there were some struggles in some of the levels. As an example, this level's intention was for the player to catch the key thrown by the clone and then use it, but people weren't aware that they could do that. After finishing all the levels, I searched for sound effects and I used pretty simple ones from multiple free sources. I also found such a banger soundtrack that I ended up using, which was the one at the start of this video. I then added a simple cutscene, the main menu, boss menu, a level select menu, and a bunch of other polish. Then I submitted the game. Now, throughout the voting period, there are a lot of positive comments but also some really useful feedback. There's a couple of things that I could have fixed easily that I missed, which is unfortunate, but it's too late anyways, so I added those fixes after the jam ends. So, about the video title. I did end up only getting around 215 on my enjoyment ranking, and the rest of the rankings weren't bad either. It's out of 10.6 thousand, so it's around 2% area, which was pretty cool. But then, the day comes when Mark Brown from GMTK made a video on his favorite games. Out of all the games, one stood out to me.
Count Your Clones is a mind-bending, single-player, co-op game. Basically, you're a little alien who is trying to explore a planet before they're killed off at the end of a 6-second countdown. Now you've got to start again, but your previous self is still here, repeating everything they just did in the previous loop.
Sounds familiar? In fact, I even played the game before and it's essentially the same idea as mine, which was pretty cool. Even though my game didn't end up getting featured in the video, which made me a bit sad, I still feel like sort of a winner because a game with the exact same mechanic as mine is featured in the video, and that indirectly means my game's mechanic is also fun enough. There's also a lot that I can learn from the game. Huge props to the devs of Count Your Clones. They did pretty well. Overall, this was a really fun game jam. I originally wasn't planning to join, but after I did join, I came out with no regrets. You can also try out my game, Timmy's Dejavu. I'll leave the link in the description down below. I also highly encourage you guys to play the other games as well. Other than the mentioned Count Your Clones earlier, here are some of my recommendations which I will also link with the Game Jam page in the description down below as well. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next video.